Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. This may be the first event on your schedule, but it's not the first event on the Secretary's schedule, so thank you for your patience. I'm Jessica Matthews, President of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you here for what I think is going to be a wonderful day's discussion. The event celebrates the launch of Ashley Tellis's newest book, Crux of Asia, China, India, and the Emerging Order. I'm starting to think that perhaps we should change the name of this to the Ashley Tellis Publications Company, because this is the third or fourth major Tellis publication of the year. But seriously, I want to begin first by thanking the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, who has stood behind this project and this event and this very ambitious initiative undertaking we could not have done without their support and their encouragement, and we are quite grateful. I want to thank the more than 20 Indian and Chinese authors who collaborated on this project. You have copies of the book. You've seen their very distinguished roster. This is a unique product. This collection of essays is really the first to comprehensively look at Chinese and Indian views of the new international order that these two great powers are doing so much to shape. Looking everything from global institutions to economics to national security, energy, space, it's a soup to nuts look. And it looks both in great detail and at very broad strategic strokes, capturing two very divergent worldviews. It's going to be of great value to policymakers in Beijing, in New Delhi, and I think in Washington and in Europe, as we help to inform us as we try to craft policies that work for us, for the region, and for the world. Here to lead off this conference, we are delighted and honored to be joined by a scholar and policymaker who's known, I think, probably to everyone in this room. Kurt Campbell has been closely involved in shaping American policy towards the Asia-Pacific for many years, maybe decades. He's taught at Harvard and served as an advisor to the Joint Staff. He's been a director on the National Security Council staff. He's been Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Pentagon, and of course, most recently, Assistant Secretary for Asia Pacific at the Department of State. During his time out of government, he worked for many years at our sister institution, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, before co-founding and leading the Center for New American Security. He has thought deeply and widely and written at great length about America. I don't mean length I'm sorry. He has written in great depth. He's written that's right. That's right. He's written in great depth and with great originality on American foreign policy, particularly towards Asia. For the last 4 years, he's been overseeing American bilateral relations with more than 30 countries in this region and been instrumental in the rebalance of American foreign and security policies towards Asia. So we're really honored to have him with us this morning to share his thoughts on China, India, and the emerging world order. So please help me welcome Kurt Campbell. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jessica. It's really an honor to be here, and I want to thank Jessica for all her incredible work over the years. Let me tell you, for me, the work that Jessica in particular has done on the ways to conceptualize climate change with respect to security are some of the most important avenues of intellectual endeavor, I believe, ongoing, and I think it's one of the great calls of the next decade in terms of areas of new and renewed focus and endeavor. I also want to thank my good friend Ashley Tellis, who I've had a good chance to work with over the years. I think he, in many respects, was the author of the initial American engagement of India at the beginning of this century, and he has helped us as we have thought long and hard about how to engage India, not just directly in its neighborhood and in a larger set of security and other endeavors, but also working and thinking about India as an Asian Pacific country. And I think that's one of the most important efforts that I think is going to be necessary going forward. Let me just say a few words of what it's like living in a period of transition. And if you're working at the State Department, every little thing has an omen, and so I've had a good chance to spend a lot of time with Senator Secretary-elect, or whatever Kerry, and also welcome Secretary Clinton back to the State Department. So as you drive into work, imagine this: everyone has their little things that go along with their positions, and so as I drove in early this morning after piano and daughter up all night with the flu, there's a giant dump truck in my parking spot at the State Department. So I'm like, I wonder what that means. And then I go upstairs, this is true, there is a guy with one of those incredibly long snakes going down my toilet in my office, trying to figure out what's clogging it up. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And he said, "Oh, I thought this office was vacant." And so I'm sure nothing to read into that. Everything's going well. So anyway, I wanted to have a chance to come over today, first of all, to thank Ashley for his intellectual leadership and to commend them on this endeavor. But I'd also like to talk a little bit on, at least from my perspective, what's next with regard to the Asia-Pacific region and to the American role in it. I think it's fair to say that over the course of the last couple of months, I've had more people come up to me quietly and ask, can this endeavor be sustained? Do you have the wherewithal? Do you have the capacity? Do you have the resources in order to sustain an important strategic rebalance in the Asian-Pacific region? Now, I believe quite firmly and strongly, for a variety of reasons, that is set, and that there is a deep recognition at a strategic level in a bipartisan sense, both with Republicans and Democrats, but importantly, among other key constituent groups, trade, economic, security, political, and the like, that the future and the history of the 21st century is going to be written in Asia. I don't think there's any doubt of that. The lion's share of the history is there. We will have important and enduring security, political, operational responsibilities in the Middle East and South Asia, but I believe that the wheel has turned and that we are now proceeding on what is our natural destiny, which is as an American Asian Pacific strong partner going forward in the 21st century. And we have many challenges associated with that, both the pull to come home. One of the things that we have found at the end of every major martial engagement of the 20th century, at the end of the Korean War, Second World War, Vietnam War, is a desire to bring resources and focus back home. This would be one of the first times in our history that rather than coming home that we would actually pivot. I know we have to be careful with that word, although the president likes it, and focus with the same intensity in the Asia-Pacific region that we have on other regional circumstances. At the same time, it is undeniably the case that enduring security challenges in the Middle East and South Asia and elsewhere are going to demand American leadership and engagement. And so there is much to be done. It's very challenging. At the core of the most important question about American leadership in Asia, in fact, though, is not about more meetings, more engagements, and more initiatives in Asia per se. as important as anything that we can do is how we conduct ourselves domestically over the course of the next few years. Whether we are able to get our domestic budget situation resolved to at least some level, whether we are able to engage effectively on some of our domestic challenges, I think will be at the heart of how Asia views our enduring role in the Asian Pacific region. And what we have seen of interest is a wonderful comment and commentary by the current Australian foreign minister, who said the United States is essentially one budget deal, one comprehensive budget deal away with vanquishing any thought of American decline in the Asia-Pacific region. And I think for a variety of reasons, if you look carefully at American competitiveness, at the preparedness for the United States to effectively engage economically, politically, and strategically in Asia for decades to come, I believe that that remark is essentially accurate. And I think that is hopefully one of the animating features that will cause key players in the United States to come to the better sort of recognition of the need to work together going forward. If I can say, I think in the past, over the last 20 or 30 years, there have essentially been a couple of schools of thought in the United States about how to essentially formulate and execute American foreign policy in Asia. Essentially, and I'll put them in rough general categories. No one fits precisely in any category. If you tell a person that you belong in that category, they'll tell you why that's not the case. But essentially, I think if you were to conceptualize it, there are 4 or 5 groups until recently. The first group essentially perhaps has not argued openly, but fundamentally believes that at the core of American strategy has to be to get China right. And that if you work and focus on China, then like a pinwheel, other aspects of Asia will follow through and follow suit, right? And at the center of American strategic endeavor is this enduring challenges, first to lure China out of isolation and some xenophobia 20, 30 years ago, and now to deal and shape the choices of China as a rising great power in the international system. Then there's probably a second school of thought that has argued that the key to effective maintenance of the United States' role in the Asia-Pacific region is through strong security partnerships and alliances, maintaining that role with Japan, South Korea, unofficial relationships with other countries like Singapore and the like, close unofficial partnerships with Taiwan, critical security relationships with countries like Australia, the Philippines, and Thailand. And it is through those mechanisms, long established, that you are better able to deal with challenges like North Korean nuclear challenge, challenges of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, and indeed even other New Age challenges like terrorism and fundamental Islam in Southeast Asia. Then there probably has been a third group that much smaller and not as prevalent recently in the executive branch, but still can be seen elsewhere, that has argued that the biggest challenge to the United States is the challenge posed by China, and a very clear sense that China somehow poses a challenge like a latter-day Soviet Union, kind of in black and white terms, and that has animated in some security and other circles thinking about how to conceptualize relations in Asia. I think there is then a couple of other groups, much smaller, 1 or 2 groups have argued at various times that a particular issue, whether it's the support of democratization in Cambodia or reaching out to Indonesia at a critical period or North Korea diplomacy, was thought of as the most important thing. And so you basically pivoted your overall relationships in Asia to deal with those specific issues. And then perhaps finally, there is a group of people that has argued that, look, these conceptions are hopelessly 19th century, and that the real challenges of the 21st century are multilateral and transnational: climate change, energy security, and the like. Now, in fact, anyone who's intelligent recognizes that you have probably people in more than one camp, and there is a kind of a mixture, a recipe involved in any complex thinking about the region as a whole. But I would argue that one of the more important contributions of the most recent period, and particularly Secretary Clinton and the key people around President Obama, is that there is now a new school of thought which essentially argues all in, and that you are no longer able to do part of this. You have to have a much more comprehensive game plan that involves a deep, substantial engagement with China, working very closely with our enduring security partners, building much stronger multilateral institutions in Asia, using the frameworks of Europe at the dawn of the Cold War to build institutions like the East Asia Summit, ASEAN Regional Forum, hopefully revitalizing APEC and the like, and key partners inside important organizations like ASEAN, building much stronger partnerships with countries like Indonesia, the leading state in many respects of Southeast Asia, working in a sustained and deliberate way to bring India in to the architecture and the dynamism of the Asia-Pacific region. Not only bridging that gap that occasionally exists between India and China, but as importantly working with India on Southeast Asia and the like. But it does not end there. Closer relationships with Vietnam and, frankly, revitalizing security partnerships like Thailand and the Philippines that frankly have suffered at times from a form of strategic neglect, and countries in which in the past we had very strong relations but have had remarkably little strategic interaction for decades, and I'm thinking here particularly of New Zealand. In addition, a recognition that any successful American policy in Asia has to be profoundly multifaceted. And I think one of the challenges that we faced, I do not believe it is accurate, by the way, but there is a belief that the leading vectors of our engagement over the last 2 or 3 years in the Asian Pacific region are military as opposed to economic, commercial, people-to-people, and the like. I would argue, in fact, that there is much more that is going on along these lines than people normally recognize, and that, in fact, for us to be successful in Asia, that we must convey a sense of an all-in strategy in which Asians look to the United States as an optimistic, engaged, and durable trading and economic partner, and that we have a vision for an economic future that doesn't have us cowering in the face of strong economic competition from the Asia-Pacific region. And so I believe for us to be successful going forward, it will need this all-in comprehensive strategy going forward. There are several elements, I think, that will need to be featured going forward. And I think as important as anything else is how to think about, if you will, rebalancing the rebalance. I worked with Jake Sullivan, Secretary Clinton, on the promulgation of her piece in foreign policy about Asia policy. Most times in government, I think many of you understand this, you come up with a strategic initiative, and you roll it out with fanfare, and it gets remarkably little attention. It is extremely rare that you come up with something and it gets much more attention than you anticipate. And then you are dealing with something very different than just the disappearing factor of most government policy. It is the unintended consequence of the piece that you wrote. And for us, that was sending a message in particular to Europe that somehow we were turning away from Europe and that we were not as engaged in Europe in the way we had been in the past. And I will say one of the things that we've tried to do in the last couple of years, let me just underscore, there is a deep recognition in Europe that the 21st century is going to involve Asia as well. And so everything the United States has ever done of significance and importance, whether it's the Balkans, whether it's Afghanistan, Pakistan, climate change, we've done in partnership with Europe. Every single thing. What is the glaring hole in our agenda? We have not yet had a fundamental deep, engaged dialogue with Europe about Asia. And that is essential going forward. We've taken the initial steps, but we need to work together on so many things. And there are people who say, well, look, what do we have in common? So much. And I will tell you, one of the great success stories quietly has been our ability to work with Europe behind the scenes on gauging our engagement strategy with respect to Burma, Myanmar. But also, we can coordinate more closely together on human rights issues, on democratization questions, sustaining that process in Asia, and as importantly, a recognition that some of the same challenges that German and Scandinavian and British and French businesses face in Asia, American businesses face. So we need to work with them more closely on market entry issues, on protecting intellectual property, and as importantly, focus on macroeconomic challenges going forward. So one of the most important things that we can do going forward, Ashley and others, Jessica's team here at Carnegie has helped other institutions. I see my friend here from AEI who's also done this. We need to work more closely with Europe on Asia, and it is essential going forward. It is also the case that as you look at sort of the conception of the rebalance, it has many strategic features in it that, frankly, we should have elaborated more on. And one of them is the rebalance in the nature of the economic relationship between the United States and Asia as a whole. The United States, for us to be successful, are going to have to market much more effectively our goods and services in Asia to the growing middle classes, not just of China, but of Southeast Asia and elsewhere. It will be essential, and as a consequence, it will also be important for the United States to accept and make more effective capital investments in the United States from Asia. So for the last 30 years, it has essentially been the reverse, American capital investment in Asia and Asian goods coming to the United States. Going forward, there's going to have to be a rebalance of that, in which some more investment comes in the United States and more American goods and services go to Asia as a whole. That will be a critical part of our rebalance. But in addition, if you look fundamentally at American strategy in Asia over decades, it is clear that we have been primarily focused on Northeast Asia in security respects and political dialogues. And one of the things that we have sought to do is to revitalize our engagement with Southeast Asia, with the institutions and the individual states of Southeast Asia. That must be sustained. And so that rebalance has to be not just, between the Middle East and Asia, which is the part that is most focused on, or the economic one between Asia and the United States, but between Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia as a whole. That will be critical going forward. The other issues that I think will be difficult, and I will just be direct about this, what we have done in the United States over the course of the last 15 years is create a cohort of people in the intelligence community, in our political apparatus, in our diplomacy, and in our soldiers, sailors, and statesmen, who are remarkably familiar and effective in dealing with every aspect of what we call post-conflict reconstruction or development issues in Afghanistan, Iraq, and elsewhere. We need to have a similar purposeful engagement endeavor, as we have in various times in our past, on creating the next cadre of people that will, in fact, play the role of staffing the U.S. government at the senior levels on the Asia-Pacific region. And I am struck occasionally by the lack of depth, both in our political parties and in our key institutions at the highest levels when it comes to knowledge, understanding of the key factors and variables that animate the most dynamic region in the world by orders of magnitude, Asia. And that investment, more than money on the side or AID programs or, frankly, military exercises and the like, which I am confident will follow through. That investment in people could not be more important. One of the things that I'm grateful for Carnegie, for CSIS, for AEI, and CNAS, I am seeing now a younger cohort of people in their 20s and 30s who are emerging, who have knowledge, passion and interest in Asia. The key is how we are going to get through the next 10 years, making sure that we have the right people that will be at the helm of our ship of state to manage this critical endeavor going forward. I will also say I have been struck at a period of enormous dynamism in the Asia-Pacific region, that American businesses, some at the very top, continue to be extraordinarily engaged. But as you go beyond that top Fortune 50 companies, you are struck by the fact that the American economy has never needed really to export. And that next group of companies who have always gotten by with orders in Cincinnati or in Florida or in San Jose are starting to recognize that to be effective, to build the jobs of the 21st century, they're going to have to export more. And the most likely area to do that is in the Asia-Pacific region. If you think that care and timidity is the exclusive purview and domain of government, I have another story for you. It is very hard for any leader of a business group or a company to say, you know what, we're going to take a lost leader, we're going to go out, we're going to build relationships in a country that none of us have ever been in, whether it's Indonesia or Malaysia, and we are going to take 2 years to build that market share. It's going to cost us millions of dollars, but ultimately I am confident that we're going to make that completion. Very hard in this business environment. So we in the U.S. government have to do much more as advocates of American export and engagement. We have to do it through encouragement, through convening, through every aspect, every means of our government that's at our disposal to make sure that's possible going forward. For me, my region is called Asia and Pacific, EAP. Unfortunately, that P often is the small p. People do not realize how critically important some of the, at a moral and strategic level, some of the island nations are. The countries that vote with us by orders of magnitude more than any other countries in the world are in the Pacific. Last summer, we go every year now on a trip through the Pacific Islands. It's an incredible experience. It's the 70th anniversary of some of the most difficult battles the United States ever fought. It's incredibly powerful to go to places like Peleliu and the Solomons and, Iron Bottom Shoal, and to see where our forefathers and mothers served with such distinction. With just a little bit of initiative, we can be more engaged there and play a role going forward. We owe it to them, and it is important for us. And I will also say that anyone who has any doubts about the severity and the implications of climate change, come with me. I'll take you to the Pacific, in which many of these island nations are not facing sort of a little bit of challenges that their summers are 1 degree hotter. They are facing existential challenges in which, in a very short period of time, many of these nations will have to deal with ultimate issues about where do they go. So in short, Jessica, I'm sorry to go on so long. You guys can see I get kind of spun up on this stuff. So I'm just hoping I'm trying to roll this out longer, hoping that the dump truck will move from my parking spot and the black crow that is sitting on my window will fly. I could not be more optimistic about the period ahead. There will be enormous challenges, but I believe that we've turned the corner. The 2009 question that I heard the most of was, does the United States have the wit and wisdom to really understand that this is where your destiny lies? And I do believe that fundamentally there have been clear bipartisan commitments in the Asia-Pacific region. I do not like we're back, and the key is all of us have to do more together to sustain this engagement going forward. The 2013 question I hear the most is, can you sustain it? I will take the 2013 question over the 2009 question every time. But what I always tell my colleagues, my friends, the people I work with, nothing about persuasion and speeches or any of this stuff is going to persuade our Asian friends, who are ultimately careful, strategic, and very cautious. It's going to take doing. It's going to take several more years, a couple more administrations to sustain, strengthen, and fundamentally cement what I believe is the most important strategic innovation in American foreign policy in 50 years. Okay? Jessica, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have time for questions?
That's what we call polite applause. Okay.
Do we
Yes.
have time for a few questions?
Yes.
Do you want to do it yourself?
I know my friend here is going to ask me questions, so I'm going to pretend that I don't see him, and I'm going to come to him in a little bit so we get a little flow going before he throws some big wrench for me here. Go ahead. Yes. Please identify. Yes, you. I'll come to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary. My name is Dong Huiyu with China Review News Agency of Hong Kong. It was reported by Japanese media that this morning, Chinese fighter jets approached so-called air defense identified area nearby Japan, and the Japan's jets had emergent taking off and monitor the situation over there. So are you concerned about the new development and escalation over there? And when you go to Tokyo next week, what message would you like to convey to the Abe administration? Thank you.
In fact, the United States government is concerned by tensions over maritime issues, and particularly this recent incident that you describe. We are involved in quiet diplomacy with friends and allies in the region. We had a very good meeting yesterday with Vice Minister Sui, both at the White House and at the State Department. I will be traveling next week with Mr. Russell and Mr. Lippert from the White House and the Defense Department. We'll be having consultations with friends in Tokyo as well. I think our overarching message right now is that we want cooler heads to prevail. We want both countries to recognize that literally Northeast Asia is the cockpit of the global economy currently, and that we cannot afford continuing tensions to degrade relations between the two most important countries in Asia, Japan and China, to the point that it threatens not only our security but our economic prosperity going forward. That's essentially our message. I don't really want to talk much more about this. To be honest, I think more effective diplomacy on these issues takes place behind the scenes than in the public glare, but we are deeply engaged on it and in very active consultations with all involved. Yep. You.
Hi, my name is Eric Lowe. I'm with the Fair Observer. As a follow-up question, do you think that the United States should play a bigger role in these kinds of regional disputes, not only between China and Japan, but also between South Korea? All these things has been dragging on for a long time. Do you think that America, as a leadership, should really step on to basically to make an initiative, just like they did in the Middle East or in parts of Europe? Thank you.
Look, I don't have very much more to offer on this. I will say that each year at the ASEAN Regional Forum, Secretary Clinton and the U.S. government has presented very carefully our overarching principles: freedom of navigation, peaceful management of disputes, a legal process for dealing with challenges when they arrive, and the ultimate recognition of how important these sea lines of communication are to peace and prosperity generally. These are critical issues for the United States. They're of the strategic interest of the United States. We will continue to underscore that in every venue and every forum going forward. And we recognize that right now there is enormous importance for all involved to handle these issues with care. Yes, hi.
Thank you. My name is Chi Ning Nguyen with Voice of Vietnamese Americans.
Hi.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
sir.
good.
Recently, there's a new trend of thought of creating equilibrium between powers, especially in the Asia-Pacific. And the U.S. is counted as one, and India and China and Australia and all other countries are combined to create an equilibrium. Now, Vietnamese Americans are very concerned when we see that Professor Hugh White and the former Prime Minister of Australia also have stressed the idea of accommodating China, especially to let China have influence over Indochina and the Southeast Asia Sea. Now,
I think I have your question generally.
Yeah. Together with that, though, with the current behaviors that China keeps stepping up in the South China Sea since the 1st of January, actually since December of 2012, they've been harassing Vietnamese fishermen actively, and they've been having military and ship entering the sea, the disputed areas. What do you suggest we do?
I don't have much more to add on the maritime issues, but I will talk a little bit about my good friend Hugh White and some of the commentary that we see in Asia about whether countries need to make choices about who they favor or moving in one direction or the other. Our animating approach to all our dialogues in the Asia-Pacific region is that we encourage all countries in Asia to have a good relationship with China. We support that. We believe that is in their best interests and in ours. And we are not the only one. They're not the only ones who want a good relationship with China. We do as well. And so anyone who thinks somehow that that is not an underlying foundation for modern diplomacy is not paying attention. So everyone is working to build stronger, more stable, more comprehensive, more resolute ties and communication with Beijing, and we support that. We also believe that no country should need to or will need to choose between the United States and China or India or Japan. That, in fact, if you look at the countries that are most successful in Asia, or indeed elsewhere, they are countries that have managed to have very effective relations with all the countries, and particularly between the United States and China. No one is putting pressure on countries to have to choose. And in fact, we believe Australia has been extraordinarily effective in managing relations with both the United States and China. We think that should and can continue, as countries like Singapore. I think Vietnam, in many respects, has also had a very productive set of interactions with China, and also is building a stronger relationship with the United States. So our overarching prism is one in which we believe that countries should maximize their interests and their options by developing stronger ties with a range of countries, including the United States and China. Let me go to the back a little bit here, okay? Yes, sir, there with, yes, that's good.
Thank you very much, Damian Tompkins, East West Centre. I'm wondering if you could elaborate on your engagement with Europe regarding Asia, and what's happened, and where do you see this going in the future?
Thank you. I really appreciate the question. We've used a variety of mechanisms, and I would alert you, it did not receive very much attention, but it was a very big deal for us. Last year, Lady Ashton and Secretary Clinton at the ASEAN Regional Forum issued a formal statement with a work plan for how the United States and Europe and the EU would work together on a variety of issues: institution building, dialogues about Asian issues, also working collectively on challenges like lifting sanctions with respect to Burma, Myanmar. That is a first step. In addition to this institutional engagement between the United States and EU, and I think there's a variety of reasons that the building of the service in Europe is going slower, and so we have to be patient in that respect. So we are also working closely with individual states. We've had a number of what are called, I've been told, quints or courts. I haven't mastered all the European language, but meetings between the United States, Britain, Germany, France, and Italy to talk about key issues in the Asia-Pacific region. Those have been very valuable. I've learned an enormous amount from my counterparts in that regard. I will just note that when people think, well, gee, why is this important? If you sum up the aid and assistance from the EU, it is more than any other country in terms of what they do in the Asia-Pacific region. Work on climate change, on the Lower Mekong Initiative, work in the Pacific, you name it, very valuable. And so coordination on aid and assistance is also going to be important. In addition, there is actually more work on security issues, but security broadly defined, and we think that is an effort that should continue going forward. I will say that this is still in the nascent stages, but there are passionate advocates in all capitals that believe that this is, in fact, what the 21st century is going to be about. And the key is always to use your elbows in these hour-long meetings between European leaders and American leaders to make sure that in addition to talking about Afghanistan and Iran and all the things, that you have time to talk about the Asia-Pacific region. That's going to take time. We have not yet reached what I would call escape velocity with this, but I believe in time we will. I want to go in the back again. The gentleman with the glasses who's raising your hand there, the black watch, that's you. Yep. You have a microphone?
It's making its way. Thank you. Michael Finger. I worked a long time for the World Bank in Asia, but just a while ago before they outgrew our portfolio. I'm pleased to learn that someone of your competence and sensitivity is managing our relations with this part of the world. My question is to call attention to a point that you went over as one of the givens that we never question in these relationships when you listed protection of intellectual property. I would like to suggest that that be something we give more thought to, because one could argue that overprotection of intellectual property is an important reason for the moving of virtually all the production process of the United States, except the ownership of the trademarks, offshore, and part of the explanation for why, in conjunction with the malpractice law, overprotection of intellectual property doesn't explain why our medical costs are so much higher than they are in the rest of the world. So I compliment you for what you're doing. What I'm trying to do is make your job even more difficult by saying you put this into the list of things you think about, and not just one of the things you take as a given in our policy.
It's very interesting. I had to just admit it's just not an area that I have as much expertise in, but frankly, you've sparked me to try to learn a little bit more, and I thank you for that. Any other? Okay, Jennifer, and then I'll come up to you. I'm preparing my confidence. I'm on the diving board. I'm coming to you next. So.
Well, maybe I can be a warm-up. Thank you so much, Kurt. And I just was curious, about a few years ago, of course, the North Korean provocations prompted consultations among U.S., Japan, and South Korea, and questions of deterrence and so forth. Yeah. And I'm wondering where that went in view of recent relations. Are they still ongoing?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, great question. Frankly, one of the issues that has concerned us in recent times has been, after a period of very substantial warming between Japan and South Korea, there have been recent tensions over the course of the last year or so that have undermined the quality of the relationship between Japan and Korea, which we want very much to be forward-looking and engaged on mutual prosperity. What we have are two very strong security relationships and political relationships with the United States and Japan. And increasingly, we want that other leg of the triangle to lengthen and get stronger. I think we've had a few setbacks. I will also say that under Mark Lippert's leadership at the Pentagon, we have managed to maintain very strong defense ties and intelligence ties on the challenges that are provided by North Korea. But frankly, for those to be fulsome, for those to really have impact, they have to be politically entrenched in both governments and supported. We have strongly encouraged Prime Minister Abe, and one of the reasons that we'll be going next week to both Japan and South Korea is to ensure that both governments are committed to both rebuilding and building this important relationship between Japan and Korea for the 21st century. Okay, I'm ready.
We'll take one more.
I can take two more if you want it. So
all right.
whatever you need, Jessica. Okay, I'm sorry I was late. So
Thank you very much, Mr.
ready.
Secretary John Zhang with CPI TV of Taiwan. Thank you for keeping me on your mind. The question that I'm going to ask is a follow-up to the first question. It's not the first time that the U.S. has expressed concern or has tried quiet diplomacy in terms of calming the situation down in the East China Sea. But the tension continues to rise, with Japan threatening to fire tracer shots against Chinese surveillance aircraft, and China sending military jets into the area. Will there be a time when you have to examine how effective your quiet policy is? Are you going to will there be a time when you decide to go public, to try something different? because tension continues to rise, Mr. Secretary. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your question again. Well, let me just say, as I underscored at the outset, we are concerned about the tensions and the recent incidents, and that is one of the reasons why this rather comprehensive team from the Pentagon, from the State Department, and the White House is going to the region next week, and this is going to be one of the top topics on the agenda is urging care and caution in this respect. I can take one last question if that's right. So yes, sir. Okay.
I'm Professor Xia Liping from Tongji University, Shanghai, China.
I've read your stuff, yeah.
Speech is very interesting. I have a question. What do you think of the future trend between of relations between China and the United States? In your opinion, the two countries will have more cooperation or more competition? And in your opinion, how to reduce the strategic distrust between the two countries and how to increase the cooperation between the two countries?
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the question. It's a good way to end. Let me just say that that the United States is committed to building a strong, multifaceted, comprehensive partnership between the United States and China. That is a very tall task, but it is one of the most important things for American foreign policy going forward. And that it requires very hard work and basically confronting some of the most difficult challenges on the global scene. We do this for a variety of reasons. We do this because the region expects and the world expects the United States and China to get along, that we work to overcome our differences, and that we work intensively to understand each other, to appreciate each other's perspectives, and to tackle areas where not only the United States and China, but China and perhaps other countries in the international system have had disagreements or challenges. We also do this because a condition for us being able to have a deeper, broader set of relationships in Asia is an expectation of a good relationship between Beijing and Washington. Countries in the region are comfortable doing more with us, working with us, when they see Beijing and Washington getting along, and see also Beijing is able to do more in Asia as a whole, also when there's a sense that this is not part of some strategic chessboard, and that, in fact, positive sum outcomes are possible. I have great respect for Wang Zhize and Ken Lieberthal. In fact, I worked with them and I helped advise or gave interviews and such for their piece on strategic mistrust. I will simply say at a personal level, I've worked hard over the last 4 years on innumerable challenges with some of my counterparts in the Chinese system. And on certain parameters, I've developed more trust and confidence with some of those partners than with almost any relationship I have in the Asia-Pacific region. So I have a lot of confidence that with elbow grease, creativity, and intensity, that there are people in both systems that are committed to overcoming areas of distrust and misunderstanding towards building this kind of relationship for the 21st century. I personally accept that there will be both cooperation and competition in a relationship. That is inevitable. But what we want is that competition to be housed within a larger receptacle or basin of cooperation and not the reverse. And it is also the case that it seems to me that there are perhaps many forms of strategic mistrust, but I'm mostly interested in two different kinds. I think there is strategic mistrust that is based on fallacies, misunderstandings, propaganda, and ignorance. And then there is strategic mistrust that is based on a true understanding of areas such as systems of governments, values, promotion of certain common areas where there are differences. My goal is to do everything possible to eliminate the strategic distrust that comes from the first category, right? Based on propaganda, ignorance, and misunderstanding, and focus much more on those areas that do exist that require creative diplomacy, a recognition that some problems can't be solved today, that can only be exported into the future, or that, in fact, it is possible to have solutions in which both sides feel relatively good and somewhat disappointed, as opposed to simply zero-sum outcomes. I believe that is a work in process, and that part of the intense strategic engagement in Asia has to be and will be a much more intense a set of engagements across the board, politically, strategically, commercially, militarily, between the United States and China. China sometimes is reluctant to pursue certain aspects of engagement. We have to be persistent and untiring in our insistence that we do want these venues, whether it's military confidence building, whether it's issues on human rights, that we seek and want a comprehensive, respectful dialogue between the two of us. I think that is an essential feature of modern diplomacy in the 21st century. And ultimately, I'm very grateful to Ken and to Zhi for providing us an assessment that calls all of us, particularly diplomats, to work harder and to do a better job to deal with these challenges in our relationship. Thank you.
Let me just say one word, and then I know Ashley wants to before you leave. It's almost formulaic in Washington to begin and end any speaking engagement that involves somebody from the military or the Pentagon by thanking them for their public service. We do it far too seldom with members of our diplomatic corps and those who are working from the State Department and the White House on diplomacy. Obviously, the knowledge, the deep knowledge acquired over decades, and the commitment of public servants on that branch of our international relations is at least as important a form of public service. And I think Kurt Campbell has personified both those qualities over many, many years. So in thanking him for today, I would also like to thank him for all the public service. And before you thank him, let's let Ashley thank him.
Well, Ashley's coming. Can I just say how much I appreciate the first thing? And just as a general, the first thing I have to say, I loved working in the Pentagon. It compares nothing to the people that I've worked with at the State Department. If you work in the uniformed branches of the U.S. government, everyone stops you on the street on a daily basis and thanks you for your service, right? You have no idea how hard diplomats work under increasingly difficult circumstances. Every week I get a letter from a congressman or a person, and the letter almost always run the same way. Someone has performed an enormous act of sacrifice or service to support someone in their time of need, or has done something beyond the call of duty. And the letter often is a thank you letter, but it also is incredulous. You're not going to believe this, but this lazy pinstriped guy went out of his way to help me in my time of need. And I can't tell you, this is the first time this has ever happened, that anyone, you have no idea how hard these people work and what they do for the United States at a time that it's hard. And they, not our military, they are the ones who are in the forefront of this rebalance right now.
I promise you this was not coordinated. I did not know what Jessica was going to say, but I think I would be really remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to actually echo some of the sentiments that Jessica just expressed. I want to take a few moments, just a couple of minutes, to really put on the record very special thanks to Kurt on two counts. First, as a scholar at the Carnegie Endowment. In Kurt, we have had a friend and someone who has been deeply supportive of scholarship in support of better public policy. We saw this with Kurt long before he came into government, but that, mercifully for all of us, actually continued throughout government. Whenever we wanted time, whenever we wanted advice, whenever we wanted to have a conversation about the world that we study, Kurt has always made the time for us. And so simply as a member of the fraternity of the think tank community in Washington, I want to express very special thanks to Kurt for all the considerations that he has extended to us and to me personally over the years. I want to say a second thank you, and that is as a citizen. I don't think I need to emphasize the extraordinary role that Kurt has played in shepherding the rebalance. The fact of the matter is, everything that he has done over the last decade prepared him for that role. And he began to make the case for the rebalance long before he came into office and started putting the building blocks in place for implementing that policy when he finally became the Assistant Secretary. And as a citizen, I think we are extraordinarily privileged to have someone of his wisdom, with his insight and his energy, driving the policy in a very difficult part of the world. Since I have appointed myself as the unofficial historian of U.S.-India relations, I also want to tell you that one of the very important breakthroughs that we had during the Obama administration was the effort that Kurt made in integrating India into the East Asian cynosure in U.S. government policymaking. Over the last 4 years, Kurt ran what was simply the most important and the most productive bilateral dialogue that we have had with India over East Asia. It's something that we did not do historically, and Kurt has done with remarkably beneficial consequences. I was in Delhi just 2 weeks ago, and his counterpart, who has been conducting this dialogue now with him for 2 years, was deeply, deeply fearful about what would happen with the future of this dialogue once he departs office. And I told him that we would find creative ways of smuggling him in a suitcase if necessary back into these conversations, because the future of this dialogue is really something that is important to both countries. And it is a success that we simply would not have enjoyed were it not for Kurt's extraordinary commitment to making this happen. So I vote for a second term, but even if he chooses not to, I want to take this opportunity on behalf of all of us to thank him for all the work he's done and to wish him all the best in his future endeavors. So thank you very much.